Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We're very excited to have Andy Staples of Andy Staples Golf Design as the presenter on this week's Catalyst webinar. Andy, his work really needs no introduction. He's been involved in redesign work at Olympia Fields in Chicago, PGA National in Florida, Mount Bruno Country Club in Montreal, Canada. Here in California, he's done San Vicente Golf Resort near San Diego, and also up in the Bay Area, he's been involved in renovations at San Jose Country Club as well. Andy's approach can be described with one word: harmony. Andy was named one of the 9 most innovative people in player development in 2016 by Golf Inc. Has taught the subject of golf course design at Harvard Graduate School of Design in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Did that in '99 and 2000. He's brought a keynote speaker. He's been a keynote speaker for Golf Week's Architecture Summit, the second Golden Age, 2017, and is an active speaker with the industry, having presented to the USGA, the GCSAA, the ASGCA, among others, with regularity. He's a member of the American Society of Golf Course Architects and serves as the chair of their education committee. Good morning, Mr. Staples. Thank you very much for joining us this morning on the Catalyst webinar.
Well, thanks for having me, John. I'm happy to be here.
We're lucky to have you. Feel free to take us away on a day in the life of Andy Staples. We will be asking questions along the way, and for those that are joining us on the webcast this morning, feel free to hold your questions for the end of the presentation. We'll open it up to Q&A when Andy's completed. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's great. So I appreciate the opportunity. When you first called and asked what I would be interested in talking about, you know, we're all busy as golf architects these days. COVID has had a very interesting effect on our industry, and I just figured, why don't I just give you a couple of items that I seem to spend a lot of time talking about and doing on a daily basis. So I thought I'd go through five items and 5 areas of my work, just to give you a little bit of a insight of what my day might be. Now, granted, I'm here at the office, which is rare these days. I find myself on an airplane more times than not, but I'm happy to be here to take part of this Zoom conference. So yeah, I thought I'd just quickly give a quick summary of who I am. I'm Andy Staples. I'm an owner of Staples Golf Design. We started in 2003. Actually, I started work in California. I moved to California in 1997 to work for Bob Graves and Damian Pascuzzo. And I also worked with Wadsworth Golf Construction across the country. And so I've had a chance to spend a fair bit of time. I actually lived in Sacramento and the Bay Area for a little bit. My wife's from Novato, California, so I get back to the state often. But once I moved to Arizona, I was on my own, and a lot of people ask me, how in the world did I ever make it as a golf architect? And I kind of joke by saying, I don't have a famous father, and I never won a US Open, so it's been hard. And one of the mainstays of my business has been around the idea of sustainable golf course management. And I actually was accepted for the industry's first energy and water efficiency program in the state of California, started through Southern California Edison Power Company. So I've been all around the Southern California area talking about efficiency. So fortunate to be on my own and working with some really great clients. Olympia Fields is probably the most well-known. But I'm a mainstay in the Southwest, do a lot of work in Arizona, New Mexico, California, focused on all the things that the state seems to be focused on these days. So 5 new golf courses, a number of master plans, and a bunch of consulting work. And so, yeah, so let me just kind of go through what the top 5 things that I might do today. And these are not in any particular order, but master planning is a mainstay of my business. And so building trust with owners of golf courses and memberships is a big part of what I do. So building trust is kind of an underrated attribute, I think, these days in the design world. Number 2, I do a lot of historical research. I've been fortunate to work with some really good old school clubs And so I find myself diving deep into their archives, into old photographs, into old aerial photographs. So I do a fair bit of research prior to starting these courses, and I've got a couple of slides to give you a sense of what that looks like. We maximize the fun factor. You know, when I first started the business, difficult golf is what really seemed to get all the headlines. Well, that's changing. The idea of a focus on a different F word of the fun factor. I do that now mainly through teeing placement, tee equity. And so maximizing the fun factor is a very big focus of my world. It's all about practice. So if there's anything that I'm doing on every single one of my projects, it is focused on how to reinvent and expand a practice facility. A driving range is no longer a place just to warm up. It's actually an area that membership and people that come to play golf actually spend a lot more time at these areas. So they need to be larger. They need to add different social areas, different places to hang out, different areas to work on their game, not just a long game. Very strong focus on wedge ranges and things like that. So it is all about practice these days in my world. And then finally, and I know my audience, you guys are down in Southern California. If there's one thing that you guys have probably talked a lot about, and hopefully you're not tired of talking about it yet, and that is water and the sustainable golf management in terms of water use. Now there's a big area of concern in the labor market and labor availability. So designing features that are efficiently maintained and sustainable for the future is certainly something that has been a core value of my company for a long time since I've started, and is a part of every one of my projects, whether it's a high priority in Southern California or Arizona, or even a place like Chicago that doesn't necessarily have these same water issues. Everybody is talking about how to become more sustainable. All right, so let me go back to the idea of building trust. And so I do a lot of talking and discussion of master planning and changes to your golf course. And always somebody is asking, so you want to change my golf course? And I know that much of my process in master planning is already discussing the changes and the improvements we're making with people who might not necessarily want those changes. And you know, it's interesting how golf membership can become so passionate about closing a golf course or closing portions of the golf course and making changes. But you know what? Golf is a business, and so my master plans really have been set out as more business plans than they are graphic creative plans. Of course, the creativity is a big part of this, but I believe courses should be paying less attention to revenue loss and closures of golf courses, and much more about improving the experience. And what is the end result? I've done a huge amount of research to understand pre-renovation, during renovation, and post-renovation economics. And there are examples over and over that say when you do things from an economic standpoint and about the future of improving experience, revenue increases. And so one of the things that you'll find me as part of my master plan is again around this idea of building trust, is creating a mission for our master plan. So, you know, golf architects play two very distinct roles. First, it's the creative mind. We look at golf courses objectively. We come up with your needs and desires, and we think about golf architecture. I'm one of the ones in my industry that feel that great design matters. I think great golf architecture brings people to the game. It keeps them there and makes them play more. But I'd also say that the second thing that a golf architect plays is a marketing specialist, and it's something that is a bit elusive. People don't quite understand what exactly we're meant to do. So I think selling this plan and being in front of the membership is a very important part of what I do. You've got to understand the type of club that you are. Many clubs, whether you're private or public, still run on some form of a committee. So we have to be ready to go all in on gathering feedback and understanding which segments of a membership have more say. You know, there's a struggle that's worth noting in our golf industry right now is this kind of you know back and forth between the traditional golfer, the baby boomer golfer, the golfer that kind of saw golf what it has used, what it's been over the last 20 or 30 years. And that struggle is kind of evolving to this, what I kind of have termed a young executive or the family golfer or things like that. Certainly in a private club setting, everybody's having these discussions, and it's really important to set the tone early in these types of projects to understand who has the bigger say, and trying to figure out exactly how those subsets of the golf industry come into play for who your future customer is. Everybody is exploding in play now with COVID. It's not going to last forever. We hope it will, at least for the next couple of years. But going forward into the future, what do we want this industry to look like? And so I always try to understand what that segment of the industry or of the club is that's going to make those big decisions. Finally, golf courses are living and breathing phenomenon. They're always changing. And I try to tell clubs real early on, it's about making improvement projects and planning for improvement projects well in advance from the time that you need to do things. And so I like to do test plots of existing or of new turf grasses, and I like to do field trips to other golf courses. So the forward thinking plan of a master plan goes well into the building of the trust. And then ultimately, I'm going to look, we're always looked at as a quarterback, but there's only so much a golf architect can do. And so finally, I'd love to work with a club that understands that there's a passionate person there that helps me bring things over the finish line. Because really, the end of the day, I can build trust with a membership and an owner or whoever's making the master plan, but ultimately it comes down to the people on the ground and the members of the club that ultimately are where this success lies. I do a lot of communicating. So I'm going to give you a quick Photoshop before and after, because communication tools it's one thing to be using words. It's another thing to be showing them graphically. Here's a before and after of a planned project up in Montreal, Canada, Mont Bruno. And so tree removal and bunker renovations is a big part of it. And we want to make sure we graphically show that and be accurate. And then another really exciting part of my world is this technology with Google Earth. Here is a kind of an aerial image in Google Earth of a proposed master plan for a club here in Arizona that I've overlaid into Google Earth. You can actually zoom in through Google Earth. So the communication tools are just exploding in terms of how much technology is available and how it's one thing to have a great idea. It's another thing to be able to communicate it. So certainly a big part of what I'm doing in the master plans of building trust. The biggest example of my success stories, I have to draw attention to Meadowbrook Country Club in the Detroit metro area up in Michigan. Kind of a mid-tier club, family club, private equity membership, 650 golf courses in the state of Michigan. Was certainly not a club that anybody went out of their way to go see from an architecture standpoint or anything like that. It was just a kind of a core group of membership. We went through this master planning process and decided, and the membership decided with an 83% approval of a master plan and 76% voted to close the golf course in a season where you only play golf for about 5 or 6 months in the Midwest. We shut down and renovated to old school. The original architect was Willie Park Jr., built in 1916. The success is here now. Pre-COVID, they were full before the boom, and then ultimately we see the rankings. And I joke about rankings. No one really cares about the rankings unless you fall out of the rankings. Everyone that gets into the rankings cares a lot about it. And now we're seeing Meadowbrook, out of 650 golf courses, being ranked nicely by the media outlets, and really good. If you do a search for Meadowbrook online, the Fried Egg has done a great job of showcasing some of the imagery. It's a course I'm very proud of, and it's been a great success story about master planning. All right, going to move to my number 2, my historical research. This is speaking of Meadowbrook. This is a group of us that went over to England to research old Willie Park Junior golf courses. This is out at Sunningdale New. And so part of what I always do in my master plans, and even more significant, whether it's older or newer, is to do some historical research on how things have evolved. And I kind of alluded to this on the plan or the Google Earth image. There's so much technology available and so much imagery available that we try to use this to try to document exactly where we've come from. And I think one of the major benefits of performing a historical research on whatever age of your golf course is to understand how it's evolved. This is an example of Weston Golf and Country Club up in Toronto, where I had an old aerial photograph from the 20s, and then you can blend in, using AutoCAD and Photoshop, and start to blend in the new aerial and go from the old aerial to the new aerial, start to draw lines, and then document. This is an example of, from the top, it was a plan. The second was an aerial from 1930. This is at Mount Bruno here. And then I draw lines to kind of give you a sense of how things have evolved. And on the right-hand side, I actually go through and articulate, how things were originally intended and the reasoning for why maybe some things have changed over time. Incredible exercise to go through, the idea of history repeating itself, that you can see that happening over and over in the golf industry. And so I spend a great deal of time, even before I start to draw any new ideas or anything like that, is just to understand how things have evolved. And so what does that relate to, or how does that end? Here's a picture of my recent work up in Olympia Fields on their south course. This is a green expansion. You can kind of get a sense on the left, that's the existing putting green. The dirt and the trenches is us actually using some old photography to know that the green was larger in this area. And so ultimately this is what it looks like now. We're just finishing this work this fall, where the green gets expanded. And this is one example of work that gets identified through the historical research. Here's another one, going through some old Olympians of Olympia Fields. They used to have 4 total courses. They only have 2 there now. The north course is where they're hosting the BMW Championship in 23 and had hosted the US Open. But this is the number 3 course that no longer exists. And I found this photograph, and it actually fit perfectly on a piece of property on their south course. We're renovating one of their par 3s, and we actually used that to restore back an old hole from an old course that no longer exists to try to put it back into play on their south course. So this is what it looked like in the, I think this is probably late 20s on an entirely different piece of property, and it fits almost identical to the place that we've chosen on the south course. And yes, this was taken just this week, so we are sodding and still working in Chicago and in late November and early December. We wish it wasn't the case. We had a lot of rain this year, but we'll see how this works out next year. But we're real happy with this type of membership. Is incredibly excited for this type of work to be finished and open for play come June next year. All right, so moving along, I'm going to pause to something maybe a little bit more technical. Maximizing the fun. This is a hole on a PB Dye design golf course up in Cincinnati, a client of mine for a couple of years. Built in a day that probably put more emphasis on difficulty and challenge than maybe fun and playable. But this is an example of a par 3, just to kind of prove the point of that you can do a lot on tough golf courses by placing tees properly. So a lot of talk about moving it forward in our industry and things like that, forward tee initiatives. But one of the things that I can probably tell you that I've evolved, probably one of the largest areas in my philosophy for laying out golf courses, and that is how to actually place tees based on the way golfers actually play golf. And knowing that women, for example, have learned to play the game of golf by hitting a driver and a 3-wood, and then another 3-wood, and then maybe go to a par 3, hit a 3-wood. That's all they've ever known. They've never actually been able to hit a short iron into a green, or God forbid, hit the green in regulation to putt for a birdie, for example. So I actually use swing speeds to place my tees, and this is gets a little technical, as I suggested. So let me give you a kind of an example. We talked a little bit about the forward tees. If nothing else, if you don't do anything on the entire golf course, I really focus on this 4,000 to 5,000 window, knowing that a lot of average golfers and many women and seniors swing a golf club less than 75 miles an hour. Anybody that gets on a TrackMan will attest. And it's interesting to me how few golfers actually really know how fast they swing the driver. But let me give you an example. So this is an aerial view of a golf hole, and you can see down in the lower left, these are the existing tees in white that just came in. And I use the percentages based on swing speed to lay out the proposed hypothetical distances. So what you're seeing is the blue, white, green, red, and tan are what would be the 100-mile-an-hour or longer swing speed, the 95-mile-an-hour swing speed, 85, 75, and 65. So what does that mean? Okay, so maybe here's the black, back tee, blue tee. All right, there's a little room to go back. Let's maybe push that back a little bit more. But according to the science behind swing speed, the white tees in relativity to all the players together is pretty close. So that white tee is located pretty good on top of that tee. But now the green tee is here. Let's think about moving the green tee up a little bit, and then here's the red tee as it currently designed. It actually needs to move up considerably. And then if you look at the 65-mile-an-hour swing speed, we're all the way up into the fairway. So this is kind of just an example to kind of give you a sense of just the scientific basis, or at least the research that goes in. Now, do I follow this to a T on every project? Absolutely not. Here's a breakdown of how this goes. A lot of numbers here, but at the end of the day, look on the right-hand side. If I compare what the total existing to the equity total to the proposed total, I'm trying to get yardages to actually break out evenly. Again, under this idea that we're trying to maximize fun, and the best way to provide the equitable distances is to base it off of real swing speeds. And I've done, since I've been doing this, I've been met with some incredible success, also get some incredible resistance, but it's really neat to see some people that actually consider moving up to a set of tees that aren't necessarily worried about what color they are, but they move up and actually have a ability to reach a green in 2 or in regulation and putt for a birdie, or perhaps even a par, but perhaps even a birdie, which isn't that what golf is all about? That's what I'd like to say. So instilling the fun factor is the easiest way to do that is through tees. And then I would just give you a little bit more detail on the forward tee philosophy. This is kind of it's not the greatest view, but it's looking back towards the tees. This is the first tee at Meadowbrook, and actually we've shaped those forward tees right in to the fairways. And so I try to recommend, if you do nothing else, is to try to find that 65-mile-an-hour swing speed spot and raise up a tee. So the yellow is identifying the tee pad. It's flat. It's a little bit raised. Here's your tee marker in the ground. There's not actual tees there anymore. For the fairway units, the superintendent like to just roll right over the top of these, and these are all mown to fairway height. But anybody who is interested in these tees knows right where these tees are, and everybody else that doesn't play will actually just play them as a general fairway. And if they're located properly, they're seamless and don't even really come into play for anybody else. So been met with some great success on these types of initiatives. Okay, going kind of plodding through my top 5. After I get off the tee complex, now I'm going to get into the practice. It's all about practice, right? So this is an example of a friend of mine's graphic of a short game area. You can see it's a small little piece. I think this is out east somewhere. So this is just an example of showing the kind of effort people are going through with short game areas and wedge ranges and outdoor patios and things like that. I wanted to highlight a plan that I'm working on with Forest Highlands Golf Club up in Flagstaff, Arizona, to try to highlight what items that I am now including in just about every one of my practice facilities. Now, granted, everything is a bit of a unique scenario, and I try to tailor everything to what the needs are, but I'm bringing some of the same philosophies to just about every one of my courses to great success. And I think for anybody who plays golf and everyone knows how to practice and knows how, that wants to practice, this is how practice facilities are evolving. And these 3 slides coming up are going to try to give you a sense of how practice facilities are now multi-use spaces. They're social hangouts. They're the buildings that people are putting around these areas, whether it's a performance center or an open air structure for people to just kind of to hang out as part of the tournament scene, or even just on this situation, there's a back end. So there's a front end on the right hand side, and then there's a back end. And so I'm finding that the need for teeing areas is at an all-time high, just because everybody's now spending more time here. So this is one example of the same footprint, same design, can be used on a double-ended range. So that's what these lines, these black lines and red lines show. You're hitting on each tee, you get to hit out to the targets. All of the targets are spaced at a yardage to simulate the real world conditions of the course. And then as you kind of step back, and depending upon the overall use and the timing of the property, this is a private club that actually has some times that isn't used a great deal. You'll see some red lines here. This is the short game area. So now I've got wedge ranges. I've got artificial turf tees for people to sit in one spot and just hit shots after shots to hit 10-yard increments from 60 yards to 100, 130 to 40 yards. Running shots into the green, simulating chip and runs. You'll see on the left side a flat practice green. So I'm taking a small, maybe 1,500 square foot area and shaping it not dead flat. There's still a little bit of a slope to it, but as flat as possible, so you can sit there and work on your stroke and not necessarily have to worry about breaks and things like that. That's for the other short game area greens and the practice greens. So flat practice is a big one. An area for demo days and those types of coverings and things. We're really formalizing that. Artificial turf tees now are almost mandatory, just because so many people are using them. The quality of these artificial turf tee strips are incredibly much better than they were just years ago. And then they can be shaped in almost seamlessly so that you don't have to actually even see it. So these artificial turf tees are really kind of moving past this idea of being more for public use or things like that to knowing that they're real high quality and people don't want to hit off of dirt. They need spots to hit off of, and it gives the superintendent the ability to move things around. And then ultimately we have this plan for a short course too. Our final use is a par 3 course into the target greens. So I'm doing seating areas, I'm doing fire pits. Each of the tees is a little short course. Down the lower left, you'll see a little artificial turf tee to kind of identify places to play. This is a bit of a reversible course. I don't see this to be used a great deal by a lot of people, but families, couples, kids. It also allows kids to get off the course, and for their junior clinics, you can shut down the range and do these types of things. And so finally, give you a couple of graphics. This is Isabella's up in Greyhawk here in Phoenix, Scottsdale area. Incredible social hangout right next to a driving range, right next to the putting green. And then indoor simulators. If you don't have the space for driving ranges, I'm finding clubs going right in to their basements or other places and building simulators, which to me now, if you're in a location that you shut down for the winter or aren't as open and available 12 months a year, obviously Southern California isn't the case, but these types of things are now, you put these on 4 tees, you're reserving these areas just like you would a tee time. All right, so that's my practice facility discussion, and I can't tell you how much time and energy I've spent on these types of things. I've included this in just about every one of my projects, as I've said. All right, let's wrap up with probably one of the most pressing things in golf, if no other area than the Southwest. But I think Mike Wan is the new executive director of the United States Golf Association. And I think you're going to start to see some things come out over the next 1 to 2 years about his initiatives revolving around sustainability and the footprint of golf and water. So if anybody listening here hasn't already considered any type of movement towards a more sustainable golf operation, I think you're going to be even more so and more inclined to do so in the next coming months. It's not getting better. It's only getting worse. And I think there's a blend and there's a balance. And I think when done properly and planned properly, these types of things really do make significant steps towards economics and a long term for golf. And so, yeah, water is probably the most pressing in our area. This is San Jose Country Club. Worked with a couple of superintendents here. These are 3 different varieties of Bermuda grass and 1 zoysia grass. Interestingly enough, zoysia is now coming to California, the Northern California area. There's a club here in the Phoenix Scottsdale area who has tested zoysia grass. So the idea of turf varieties is constantly changing. Santa Ana is the turf of choice in California, but I have no doubt that that's just the beginning. It's going to start to evolve into newer, better varieties. The holy grail in the Bermuda grass world is a grass that stays green all 12 months a year. We need more funding to get us to that point, but there's certainly a huge amount of pressure to do so, and huge amounts of water to be saved. So test plots is the first step, and just about every course that goes into these types of things is always doing this at least a year or 2 in advance. And then I do a fair bit of discussion around putting greens, right? Number 1 thing in golf for us is to decide is to provide quality putting green surfaces. This is a push-up green, and comparing it to the root-based sand-based root zone. You know, one of the things we spend so much energy on designing of building greens, that the bent grass and POA discussion is huge for sustainability in the future. And when you look at what a POA grass, this is actually scaled properly to the right-hand side here. A root structure of bent grass is 10 times that of POA. And so from a sustainability standpoint, choosing the right grasses. Now this is northern climates, cold zone turf structures and things like that. So obviously it depends on where you are in the country, but bent grass is certainly the sustainable grass for the future, and doing a lot of transitions back into turf grass to bent grass. Doing a lot of scanning of greens to understand putting slopes. This is a really cool slope for green speeds. You know, if you actually think about old school greens that go from 6% and speeds at 12, you know, you're actually looking at needing to stay down to 3% or less. So I do a lot of slopes of greens and things like that analysis for how to rebuild and manage for sustainable operation. Bunker liners, they're viewed as being fairly expensive, but you can do some liners now are coming down in costs. But by the I was kind of on the shelf as far as where bunker liners were in my business, but the labor savings alone is worth the transition going into bunker liners. This is a hybrid capillary concrete and a JM Duraspun combination that does exactly what we want to do with a little less money, but incredible savings and long-term life cycle increase. And then at San Vicente, we converted to Santa Ana grass. We no longer overseed at Santa Ana. This is a view down into the 4th green. So one of the things these new grasses are doing is really putting pressure on us to not overseed, to save water and to hopefully save labor in the long run. And we're real proud of San Vicente. Actually got on the cover of Golf Inc. magazine as one of the renovations of the year. Really proud of that for that club. Really good timing. And if anybody gets down there, please go by and see us. So I'm going to wrap this up. I got to end with one of the best moments in my golf life, seeing Tiger Woods win the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines. Isn't that what we all want to do as a golf architect, is get everybody standing ovation? We in golf want all of our customers to feel the same way, but you know what? Not everybody's going to be on our side. and not in every crowd, there's always somebody that may not necessarily agree with you. So as an architect, it's really hard to make everyone happy. We try to do that, but it's not always possible. So, but I do work my butt off to try to do that. So, so with that, I'd close and open for questions. But thanks for having me. And here's my contact info if anybody wants to get a hold of me and love to have a conversation. I have a quarterly newsletter that I try to highlight some of these same things that I do on a daily basis. So if anybody's interested, feel free to give me an email, and would love to have a discussion. So so John, I'll turn it over to you and look forward to some questions.
Thank you very much, Andy. Fantastic. Yes, sir. How has the golf design world in California changed since you started working here?
I'm sorry, John, ask me that question again. I'm sorry, I just got disconnected.
How has the golf design world changed in California since you started working here?
Yeah, great question. So I started knocking on doors to the superintendent world in Southern California with that energy efficiency program, as I talked about. And it was funny, and no disrespect to the superintendents, it was just, water and power were not as high of a priority as they are today. I'm talking, this is probably in 2001, 2002, and a lot of times the superintendent didn't have access to the power bill, didn't quite understand they weren't tracking their water use. A lot of water meters weren't working properly. You can name whatever. Flash forward in just a few years. I mean, I don't think that's a long period of time, and in the overall scheme of things, it moved pretty quickly. With the iceberg, I think, has moved quickly. Now everybody understands where their water bills are. They're tracking it. They know what they're paying. They know how to get they're discussing ways to reduce or at least become more efficient. The golf industry is now right in the middle of the discussion. The Southern California area, especially down in the Palm Desert area, has done an incredible job to be part of that conversation. So, the water discussion has certainly multiplied 10, 20-fold since I first started. And then I would also just add that the changes in California really revolve around this idea about labor shortages and labor expenses. I can't tell you how many people now are so much more inclined to do things to just stabilize labor and reduce the amount of highly maintained features. And so, sand bunkers now probably, by all indications, cost more per square foot to maintain than greens do, and that's pretty phenomenal. So that's why I've been in a big focus of, if I'm going to do bunkers, I'm going to do them really well and do them very artistic, but I'm not going to have 80 or 100 of them. I want to have 40 of them. Or my project down in Florida for PGA National, I have 16 bunkers. So those are the types of movements. So grass features and grassy short grass features and roll offs, those are becoming more kind of standard hazards on golf than they ever have been.
Why have so many courses in California tried so hard to keep POA out of their greens when it's clearly less, it's more cost effective to have it? And do you see this trend changing with future superintendents and practices?
Well, we probably need another hour to talk about the POA bent grass discussion. Well, so I answer it this way. So a lot of it comes down to your expectation of who your core market is, and anybody who's putted on pure bent grass knows that's the ultimate, right? That's what everyone goes for. And now, interestingly enough, there's a new chemical that's coming on board and being registered in the United States called POAcure that actually helps manage that. I'm one that I'm all for POA. I'm all for understanding, what the expectations of the club are. However, when I have a club telling me that they want pure bent grass and they want the conditions 12 months a year, and they don't want to have the bumpiness, and they don't want to have the winter damage, and they don't want to have the things that POA ends up being problematic, the only other option then is to go towards more sustainable grass, and then with that an increased management to keep it out. So it really is indicative of the economic place of where that club is. But I'm all for going with what type of grass is the most sustainable in that operation, as long as it matches the business operation and the customer expectations. So I'll give you an example at San Vicente, old Poa greens shrunk. The 1972 golf course greens had shrunk. Slopes were, obviously putting green slopes were a lot different in 1972 than they are in 2021. We converted to pure distinction bent grass with Santa Ana Bermuda grass surrounds, and the superintendent is working his butt off to keep the POA out of those greens. It's not 100%, but I would tell you with some really good management and understanding fast and firm conditions, we have a chance. So we converted to that because that's what they felt was in their best interest for their market. Whereas Olympia Fields, for example, up in Chicago, we're not fighting it at all. We got probably 80% POA on some of our greens. And so when we sought out the new areas, we're not bringing in new bent grass, we're just putting in what's there. And that's what's good for their market in Chicago.
Can you talk a little bit about, and I hate to spring this on you, but in regards to warm weather regions, particularly the Coachella Valley and where you are in the Phoenix area, the move towards perennial Bermuda grasses that keep their color through the winter season?
Yeah, so I actually converted my own home front yard to a latest new variety of Bermuda, because it stays greener longer. It's more shade tolerant. It's coming.
What's the name of that? What's the name of that?
Tiff Tuff is the one. So Tiff Tuff is one that is very successful around this area. It's actually was bred for a fairway grass, and there's 2 or 3 others that are really starting to hit, especially as you go across the country. There's a couple more that work better in the Midwest, but Tiff Tuff is probably one of my favorites in this area. And but there's some issues with it, right? It doesn't recover as quickly. There's some things to it that the unintended consequence, it might stay greener longer or green up quicker, but there's no perfect grass yet, right? So I would tell you that there is a lot of research that can be done, and I think one of the things that the California GCSA has really tried hard on is get some good funding for these types of grasses. And UC Riverside's been out in the middle of that, but the funding is just not there yet. Brian Whitlark from the USGA is right in the middle of that here out of Arizona. There's really some really good grasses, but and I would tell you that they're far better than anything that has come along with the 419s and the Tiff Dwarfs and the 328s, the things that you've heard down in the desert for so many years. It's ready to move in that direction, and it's an exciting time for turf grasses, because we're going to need to do it, because either that or we won't have as much acreage to deal with. So and these grasses are proven to use less water, so I'm a big fan of that.
Andy, from Ed Winecki here, he's thanking you for your presentation. One question he has is, with golf booming and owners and operators and the clubs all doing very well with current financials, now's the time to reinvest in the golf course. What is the first step a club needs to do to get this started?
Well, thanks, Ed. Thanks for the question. Good to get your question through this. So yeah, I 100% would tell you the very first step is to choose a great architect that can give you a good roadmap for future improvement. So master planning is huge. Have a plan in place, and have it thoughtful, have it prioritized, have it costed properly, and have a plan in place so that when changes are made to the course, it is made under the context of a real well thought out roadmap. So I guess short of choosing the perfect architect, I would tell you got to go through with a master plan.
Now, yeah, Andy, to piggyback on Ed's question there regarding a master plan, when you're at a club that is thinking about, making a move in terms of renovating the golf course and addressing some long-standing deferred maintenance issues, in developing that master plan, when you're at an equity club such as I am, you've got a lot of different type A personalities that think that the course needs this, the club needs that. How does the PGA professional help streamline the club goal and kind of sell a universal idea on what's best to do for the club for the long term?
So I would tell you the PGA professional's role in understanding the sub segments of each club is huge. And so one of the very first things I always try to do is try to identify who has the biggest and the largest say in a private club setting, because whether or not they're involved early, they will be involved later because they'll show up at some point. And so the struggle that I talked about earlier about building trust is understanding the difference between the kind of the old traditional senior member, if you will, to the young executive is real. And so I try to identify those groups and then engage with them. So I don't ask for their permission, but I do talk through some of the reasoning behind it. And I try to go straight through to those groups. I don't try to do large town hall meetings. I try to do real small focus groups so that I get to them. I give them the opportunity to comment. I tell them what my thought is. I try to have the conversations of this is what I do every day in my life. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an attorney. So you got to give me some respect, but I want to give you the respect because I understand you're going to play here for a long time. This isn't my club. This is your club. I work for you. So I need to mine those ideas and those thoughts to build that consensus and build that trust. So understanding those segments is definitely key.
I have a smoker out here for you.
So in terms of, you mentioned building trust, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because that happens to be our service goal here on our team is building member trust in everything that we do. And you mentioned building trust as a key element in your process, because obviously you're not going to make everybody happy. You never do, but controlling that narrative and managing from below is a key element in terms of selling an idea. Can you talk about some of the tactics that you've used specifically at some of the clubs that you've encountered this at?
Yeah. So if you hire me as the architect as a master planner, the very first thing I do is I have what I kind of informally call a meet and greet. So there's an opportunity for club members to, I coordinate it along with another meeting, obviously, or I'm doing some of the reconnaissance of the club, but I'd spend some time in the afternoon or early evening and have an opportunity to introduce myself. Oftentimes it's a short presentation. So when membership sees me out on the course over the next coming months, they know who I am, and I give them permission to actually come up and say hello to me. So putting a face to a name is really important to me. Another thing that I feel like I've been doing a lot more of, I don't do them on every project, but I offer it. And I offer an educational series, an architect's topics series where we kind of already know some of the issues of the clubs, because obviously they wouldn't be talking about master planning if they didn't think that they had some needs, whether it be bunkers, whether it be water, and so forth. And so I tailor a very specific series, an email series that goes out to the inbox on the master planning process, on tree management, on greens, on bunker liners. And so it's, like you would normally get, we're kind of inundated with emails these days, but I think we all like this. We all know what we like. So as long as everyone tries to pay attention to what the clubs are saying. So those types of educational topics are huge, because that gives me the one-on-one with an email that hopefully they're reading. Not everyone reads them, of course, but that's been very, very successful. And then I think finally, I would say that I try to help with, you know, assuming that the committee that I would be working with isn't necessarily fully formalized when I get hired. I try to help management and the board to come up with the right committee structure, because oftentimes I found that committees tend to be a group of the same people, and I don't like that. I like to be as broad and kind of wide ranging as possible. You have to have women on the committee. You have to have a senior. You'd like to have someone who might not want to do anything, maybe somebody that's been there a long time, kind of knows what they've done, been there, done that kind of person. So I don't like that committee to be very large. I hope it can be below 10 people, but I like to at least have it as wide ranging as possible, because those are the advocates. Because I engage them and say, okay, by the way, your group is going to come up and ask you questions. You better know what to say. So let's talk through that a little bit. So those are the three things that probably come to mind.
There seems to have been an emergence of a more fun, family-friendly short courses being introduced. And curious your thoughts on courses that could be designed to play in either 3, 6, or 9-hole loops.
Yeah, so the discussion around short courses is a little bit, it's not just a straight line as far as short courses. I'm just in general to your question, I would say I'm a huge fan of designing something less than 9 holes, whether it's a 3-hole loop or a 5-hole loop. The club I play at here in Phoenix has a little 5-hole loop that comes back to the clubhouse. So when my kids were getting into golf, I would take them through that 5-hole loop on a Sunday afternoon. So I'm a big believer in those types of kind of flexibility and routing. But you know, it's hard to actually design into that if you're not totally redesigning a golf course. So I would say, kind of moving forward, why this kind of matters from a broad scale is if you have the ability to kind of move some things around, and if you have the understanding that your market is evolving to somebody who can only get there on the late afternoons. You know, San Jose Country Club was a perfect example. Many of their members were only 10 or 15 miles away, but it took them 45 minutes to get through all the traffic to get to the club. And so you gotta be ready to capitalize those for those types of users in a setting that's less than 18 holes. So I'm a big believer in trying to pivot away from this confinement of, you know, golf has to be a round of 18 holes, because I think that's probably, you know, just in my own personal life is something that you know, is appropriate to be aware of, and to know that that's probably something that the golf industry has to look at changing.
Fantastic. Well, Andy, on behalf of the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA, thank you very, very much for taking the time to educate the section this morning. We're grateful for you sharing your expertise with us. For all the members that are on this morning's webcast, you will receive 1 MSR credit for attending the live webcast this morning. For those that are watching this Catalyst after the fact through the Catalyst landing page on the SCPGA website, there will be a 10-question quiz. A score, please take the quiz after viewing the webinar. A score of 70% will earn 1 MSR credit for attending this morning's Catalyst. Thank you, everybody. Andy, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, John.